Every day, things happen to us, who we want to be as people. We are all imperfect.
Why do you think there are some people that are so reactive?
Our bodies were wired to protect us.
Bottle it down, bottle it down, bottle it down.
Do certain humans perceive more threats than others?
There's a whole world of emotional experience because we live in a world that tells us to just be positive. The critical skills that help us to be healthy human beings.
How do you react in a way that's strategic?
Progress is one of the most important experiences for human beings. Every aspect of our lives, how we love, how we live, how we parent, and how we lead.
Talk to us about being proactive with our emotions as opposed to reactive with our emotions. Susan, tell us about that.
Every day, things happen to us. And when we react, often what we're doing is coming from an autopilot perspective, and there's no space between stimulus and response. So we're just basically reacting as opposed to being able to pause into the space and think about who we want to be as people. And most of us are reactive, but to live good lives that are deep in relationship and deep in growth and deep in connection, where we're moving towards the kind of people we could be, we want to be able to practice emotional agility skills that help us to connect with ourselves as we move forward.
Why do you think there are some people that are so reactive? Do you think that it gets worse as you've been married longer? Do you think that some people are like their childhood shaped that? Is there a lot of different reasons?
There are different reasons. The first thing that's really important is if we think from an evolutionary perspective, what's happening to us when we are surrounded by a lot of stress and complexity, when there's a lot going on, we often land up being in mental overload. And if you think from an evolutionary perspective, when we are in mental overload, we have what we call cognitive narrowing. So cognitive narrowing is where there's a threat and I just need to deal with it. When you are in a threat-based situation, you aren't thinking about who do I want to be and what kind of relationship do I want to have. So a big part of why we have this reactivity is because our bodies were wired to protect us. But there are other reasons, of course. One reason is because we've learned patterns in our childhood that don't serve us any longer. Another reason is that we've got patterns in our relationships where we keep fighting about the same thing. And so there's this quick switch from one place to the next. There are a number of different reasons, but the important thing with my work on emotional agility is that we all have the ability to learn skills that help us to be healthier human beings.
I'm going to pick on Michael and I for a second because I think Michael and I have different reaction emotions.
Let's see what your level of self-awareness is here.
I'm going to be really self-aware. Mine is all bottle it down, bottle it down, bottle it down, and then he'll do something that maybe is not a big deal, and I'll like blow up on him, and he's like, "Where did that come from?" Whereas his is he's always looking for the saber-toothed tiger all day long. Where's the threat? Where's the threat? Where's the threat? So they're different.
Well, I was going to yes, and a little bit of a follow-up to that is I had one on emotional agility, which we'll get into, but the other is, do certain humans perceive more threats than others? Meaning, like, say something happens in this room and you don't react, but I react because is there certain people that everything's a threat or more things are
We all
threats?
have personalities that we bring to the world, and our personality has a biological basis to it. And while personality can shift and change slightly over time, and we can certainly learn skills that help us to deal with our personality in the world, definitely some people are much more reactive, some people are much more laid back, some people are much more conscientious, and that's part and parcel of who we are as people. And what you describe, which is this difference in emotional reaction, we know that every day we have a full range of emotions that come up for us. Some of them are small, they're irritations or patterns that we've got in our relationship. Some are big, some are grieving, some are diagnoses that bring us and our family to their knees. And the way we think about these emotions is that they aren't good or bad. You know, there's a lot of cultural idea about just think positive or just be positive. But actually, the important thing with being emotionally healthy is recognizing that emotions aren't good or bad. They just are. They've evolved to help us to be human beings in the world. However, over time, we start learning different ways of trying to deal with our emotions. So, for example, if you grow up in a family where whenever you're upset about something, your parent, even sometimes with really good intentions, says to you, go to your room, come out when you've got a smile on your face, or signals to you that your anger or your sadness is not allowed, what you can start learning over time is what we call display rules. And a display rule doesn't mean you don't experience the anger. It just means that you have been told that in order to fit in order to be loved, in order to be accepted in your family, that those emotions are not okay. So over time, you can start learning this. And I'm not saying this is your experience. It's just a very common experience. Over time, we start learning what we call bottling. And bottling is where we suppress difficult emotions. We push them aside, often in the service of, I've just got to be positive. I've just got to get on with it. Now, what do we know about bottling? We know that over time, it can actually predict lower levels of mental health and well-being.
So are you saying you're a bottler, Lauren? I'm just wondering.
I think that I dissociate.
Just getting on with it, and you're busy, and so I'm not saying again that like every single person who bottles is going to have this, but what we know is that when people have a tendency to bottle consistently, they're experiencing stuff that matters, but they're just ignoring it. They over time are more likely to experience depression, anxiety, a lower quality of relationships, because of course, when you're holding something in, you feel to your partner often as if you aren't being vulnerable or you aren't being connected. And so bottling over time is actually associated with a whole range of poor outcomes. Now, does that mean you need to do the opposite, which is brood on emotions? And brooding is where we're like, oh my goodness, I feel terrible, I feel stuck. And the answer is no. Brooding leads to the same kinds of difficult outcomes. So this is why these emotional skills, I think of emotional agility as the critical skills that help us to be healthy human beings. Because how we feel and how we interact with our feelings impacts on every aspect of our lives. How we love, how we live, our well-being, how we parent, and how we lead.
I think that the way I look at it, and I don't know if this is healthy or unhealthy, and you can feel free to call me out, is that I look at it as getting emotional about something that bothers me is, I'm going to be really honest, a waste of time. Like, I feel like it drains my energy capacity when I could be using that energy towards something that I view as more productive.
Yes.
I'm just being really honest.
But Lauren, to call you out here just a little bit.
Please call me out. I love when you do.
I think that everybody I think everybody on the planet at times is selective about the things that they want to bottle, but then completely react. Like if I walked in on her on a meditation while she was in it and ripped her headphones off and yelled in her face, I will get an immediate reaction. You will not bottle that at all. So
yeah, but I think I save my reaction for something that really bothers me.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? I think
yes,
some people bottle certain things, but other things they would not.
Absolutely. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we shouldn't sometimes bottle. If I'm going in for a job interview and my boyfriend has just broken up with me, I'm not going to be going into that job interview thinking, gee, I feel terrible. I'm going to be bottling. I'm going to be doing it by definition. Here's the thing. If we think of the world of emotional experience, there's a whole world of emotional experience. Not every single emotional experience deserves a reaction. Okay? Because we don't have the time, we don't have the effort, we don't have the energy. It just doesn't matter that much. Now, when does it deserve a reaction? It deserves a reaction when it is moving you away from your values, when it's moving you away from the kind of relationship you want. So, for example, imagine there is something that is upsetting you and you keep pushing it aside and pushing aside and pushing it aside. What we know is there is something called an amplification effect. And amplification is, when you've got like a delicious piece of chocolate cake in the refrigerator and you try not to think about it because you're trying to eat healthily. And what do? We just think about it and obsess about it. And then we go and we get it and we don't just eat a bite, we eat the whole thing. And so what happens with emotions is the same. The more we push and push and push them aside, the more likely over time we are to just let it all out, often in ways that are unhealthy for the relationship. So when do we need to care? We need to care when our emotions are signaling, gee, this is an important conversation that you need to be having. Or this feels like a transgression of a boundary of mine that keeps on being transgressed. And yeah, I'm getting upset about it, but actually this is important to me. So we need to move towards our emotions, and we need to move towards the values that they signal when there is something that is consistently taking us away from the kind of relationship that we want.
What's
or the kind of
healthy
people.
reaction with emotion? So say someone's husband comes into the kitchen and does something outrageous. What's
outrageous?
Are we like literally going, we are doing this?
I'm just making up something like.
What have I done recently?
No, it's actually not you. I'm really
Yeah.
just generalizing.
But what's outrageous? Like define something outrageous.
I don't know. What if they just keep doing something over and over that's bothering you? Could be anything. How do you react in a way that's strategic? Like that's going to get a good outcome for you and for your partner.
Yes. So the way we're not going to do it is if that is consistent and that is consistently disconnected with the kind of relationship you want. What we're not going to do is we're not going to push it aside in the way that we've described. We're also not going to be like, oh my goodness, he needs to stop doing this, but I'm not going to have a conversation with him because that's the brooding. So one of the most important things with emotional agility and emotional skill is firstly moving away from the idea that there are good and bad emotions. There are no good and bad emotions. And I know that sounds countercultural because we live in a world that tells us to just be positive or that tells us to value people who are positive all the time. But when we just try to be positive, we're not living in the world as it is, which is your husband's doing something that irritates you sometimes. And so a really good way of thinking about the way to manage emotions effectively is firstly to move away from the idea that it's good or it's bad. It just is. Okay, it just is. When we have difficult experiences, instead of hustling with them or judging ourselves for having them, if we instead just say, this is how I'm feeling, we already defang the difficult experience. Okay? Another thing that we can be doing is to recognize that it's hard to be human. And I say that and it probably sounds a little bit flippant, but it is hard to be human in a relationship with another person where you've got your own needs and demands and values and all of this stuff happening. And so sometimes just having a little bit of compassion, recognizing that you're doing your best and that other person's doing their best, can also defang. And then what we're wanting to do is we wanting to, I think about this in my relationship. I want what I call a clean relationship. And what I mean by a clean relationship is I want a relationship where my husband isn't worried that I'm going to have it out with him because he didn't pick up the phone one day, or that there's all of these games that we're playing. A clean relationship to me is a relationship in where we feel that we're on the same team, where we're able to keep moving the relationship to points of connection and points of growth. And so when you're in that kitchen and this experience is happening to you, keeping on moving away from the conversation is not actually connected with your values. Having it out with a person is not actually connected with your values. But being able to center your values in the conversation and say something like, when you do X and when it happens consistently, I'm noticing that I'm feeling such and such. And I'm not sure if that's what your intention is, but I wanted to put it out there and to have a conversation. So what we're doing is we're moving away from naming and blaming and shaming. And instead what we're doing is we're putting this shared value on the table and saying, I love you and I care about you and we're part of this team together. And when this thing happens, I'm noticing such and I'm wondering how we can figure something out.
Michael, the other day, was in the bathroom and I walked in the bathroom and the lights were super bright and I like it when the lights are dark at night. and he was looking at his tooth because he got a piece of floss stuck in his tooth.
It was in there tight.
And
Haven't we all been there?
He was
I needed the light.
he was acting like there was a sword sticking out of his penis. I mean, it was like the way he was acting about this floss lodged in his tooth was like nothing.
Beyond.
I thought I was done for.
And so immediately when I see the lights on in the bathroom, because I like the lights dimmed, and when I see him going on about the floss in the tooth, which is like, get a little pick and get it out and let's move it along. Yeah. I reacted like kind of like bitchy, for lack of a better word. I was like a bitch to him. I was like,
well, you came, slammed the lights off.
I slammed the lights off and I was like, you have a piece of floss in your tooth, like call a dentist. Like, I can't with this. I was like, this is so ridiculous that you are like crying about a piece of floss in your tooth. And then I did what you said subconsciously later on. So I was wrong up front. But when I went to bed,
I was like... This is the first time hearing that you're wrong.
I was like...
let's go on.
I was like, I had compassion because he had to get his blood taken earlier in the day. And there was a lot going on with that. And I thought, oh, he's probably just like stressed out. And then the floss was like the final straw.
No, and also, Susie, with kids, it was like right after putting the kids bedtime, and then there was that, and then I did the blood, and there's like a lot of things.
It was just a lot of stress on him, and I think the floss was the straw, or the floss that broke the camel's back.
This is such an important conversation because most fights in relationships, a vast majority of fights are not soluble. And really what I mean is the same fight will come up, or different needs are going to come up, and there's going to be stresses that are going to be there throughout the relationship. And so actually a really important part of emotional health in relationship is not about not having conflict. And it's also not even necessarily about when there is conflict, like what did you do in that one moment? It is about being able to repair. It's about being able to come back. It's about being able to have a deeper conversation about things that have happened, because that is ultimately, strength in relationships is not born, just like emotional health is not born by never having difficult experiences. Emotional health is not born by having difficult experiences and pushing them aside. Emotional health is born by being able to recognize that there is fragility in life and being able to deal with that fragility and deal with that toughness from a place of groundedness, from a place of values. So emotional health, emotional richness is actually born of an openness, a curiosity, and a connection. And in relationships, the same. The strongest relationships are not the relationships in which there's no fighting. The strongest relationships are the relationships in which, when arguing happens, you have the capacity to be able to be compassionate, to be able to put values front and center about who do we want to be in this relationship, and to be able to then make repair towards that. That's what defines ultimately a strong relationship.
Non-toxic life has changed our world. It's rocked our world. I'll never, ever go back to some of the products that we were using. And one product that we switched out for my babies is diaper cream. So I'm obsessed with Toups Co. They have like this baby balm. I use it on mosquito bites. It's absolutely the best. It's grass-finished tallow. Everything is organic. Everything is organic cold-pressed plant oils. They never use synthetic chemicals, toxins, fillers, artificial colors, or synthetic fragrances. Everything is carefully selected. I had the opportunity of actually interviewing the founder, and everything she does is designed to nourish with essential fatty acids. And most importantly, it all balances the skin's microbiome. So if you're putting creams and lotions and oils and all this stuff on your toddlers or your kids or your babies and you're not looking at the ingredients, I highly recommend you do. There are so many added ingredients that brands throw in there. And I like shopping at Toups Co. because I don't need to worry about it. I can go on their site. I get the grass-fed beef tallow stick. It's like a stick, a balm. They can put it on their lips. And then I get that baby balm. And I always stock up on their baby balm. And it's literally the only thing I use when they get out of the shower. You can even use it as like a lotion. Toups Co. has an entire skincare and makeup line too, so you can go shop 100% natural and organic products on their site. Visit Toups Co. and use code SKINNY at checkout. You get 15% off your first purchase. That's toupsandco.com. Use code SKINNY. You get 15% off your first order. toupsandco.com. This show is sponsored by Active Skin Repair. This is a skin health company helping people heal with natural, non-toxic, medical-grade ingredients. So what this is essentially is it's a molecule that works by mimicking the natural immune response to cleanse, soothe irritation, reduce inflammation, and support healing. You could use this on everything from cuts, scrapes, burns, sunburns, rashes. I like to use this on me and Michael whenever we get any of those things. It's absolutely incredible because it's safe and non-toxic. You can use it on any kind of skin type, rosacea, eczema, acne-prone skin. I heard about this actually through a member of the community, and this is not surprising because they have 500,000 happy customers and thousands of 5-star reviews. All the ingredients are naturally clean, like I said, and you can just really treat anything that you have in a natural, non-toxic way. This is a simple solution for all your family's skin health needs. You can visit activeskinrepair.com to learn more about Active Skin Repair and get 20% off your order. Use code SKINNY. That's activeskinrepair.com. Use code SKINNY for 20% off your order. Michael got sunburned when we were on vacation. He was laying in the sun and fell asleep. And I pulled out my Active Skin Repair and put it on his sunburn, and it was absolutely amazing. It immediately soothed it. That's activeskinrepair.com. Use code SKINNY for 20% off your order. The multivitamin that I have been taking for the last 3 years is Ritual. I'm sure you've seen it everywhere. It's a clinically backed multivitamin for women 18 plus. Everything is the highest quality and everything in it is traceable. So you can actually go to the site and see where all the key ingredients come from. Everything is clean. It's in bioavailable form. The best part, though, this is so weird, is it has like a minty essence. So when you take it in the morning, I take mine on an empty stomach. It's gentle on an empty stomach. It has like this essence in every bottle. So it makes taking your multivitamins actually enjoyable. There's so many like chalky, burpy, fishy vitamins, and Ritual like completely got rid of all of those things. So it's amazing. Ritual's multis are vegan, non-GMO, gluten and allergen free, and they're also, like I said, made traceable. This is really important, especially when you're taking a supplement. A lot of women are low on vitamin D and omega-3 DHA, and Ritual increases the levels by 43% with vitamin D and by 41% of omega-3 DHA in 12 weeks. This is a good one, especially for women. Go check it out. No more shady business. Ritual is essential for women 18 plus is a multivitamin you can actually trust. Get 25% off your first month at ritual.com/skinny. Start Ritual or add Essential for Women 18 plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/skinny for 25% off.
We have the benefit doing this show for as long as we've done it to get to speak to genius people like yourself and get all of this information. I personally believe that if we haven't done this show together or hadn't done this show together for as long as I have, talking to people like yourself, that many of these moments where couples go through, we would not have been able to get there. We've learned so much here, even hearing you say this. Lauren and I, we're both type A personalities. We will fight. We've known each other since we were 12 years old. We've been together over 20 years, like a long time. We're really good at recovering and letting go of those moments. We're
long as you didn't leave that piece of floss in the bathroom.
The floss is gone.
I'm like, oh my God.
The floss, I saved it for you. So my
trauma from the floss.
But the point is like we talk to now maybe couples that are earlier on in their journey than we are. And I say the biggest thing is like, you have to be able to recognize these moments and recover from them. Like on the surface, if we're laughing about this piece of floss, at the moment it felt very serious, but really looking at it objectively now, you're like, it wasn't that big of a deal for either of us. You know what I mean? And we will recover and recognize that.
But it's a microcosm.
Yes.
Like the piece of floss, as silly as it is it's all about the floss and it's all about your eyelashes.
You know why I started doing this show?
It's so important.
Do you want to know why I started doing this show? Because my wife would come on into the internet and tell the world all of my secrets all the time, and I had no mouthpiece. So I said, you know what? I'm doing this show with you. Because I need to be able to answer in real time when she gives the world all my secrets about floss in my teeth.
Okay, I have to ask you about something that I call saber-toothing.
Mm-hmm.
He's saber-toothed. So there's always a saber-toothed tiger. We could be in the nicest beach on Hawaii with nothing, like it's the best day ever, and he'll find the saber-toothed tiger. What is that called when you're constantly looking for something?
Well, people have different levels of disposition to anxiety. People have different levels of, as I mentioned earlier, conscientiousness. And people have different levels of what we call emotional stability. Some people are going to wake up every day and just be pretty much in the same mood. and it's a stable mood and they just get on with their lives. And other people are predisposed to having higher levels of trying to figure things out and understand things and deal with things and get on with things. And it's a way of being in the world. Now, when that way of being in the world takes you away from who you want to be, so say, for example, your way of being in the world is that you are so worried all the time that your beautiful child is in front of you and you are not able to be present with that person because all you're thinking about is all of these things going on, then it's taking away from the relationship. Or where your anxiety and worry might lead you to close into yourself and not take risks in your life. So it's not the anxiety or the worry that is by definition something wrong with. The litmus lands up being, is this thing moving me towards my values or is it taking me away from? And if it's taking me away from, then learning the kinds of skills that are these emotional agility skills become really important. Again, anxiety or worry or upset or sadness, there is nothing inherently wrong with it. There is nothing inherently wrong with it. But often what we find is people look on social media and they're like, everyone else is happy. What's wrong with me? And so we start layering on. There's in psychology something that I call type 1 worries and type 2 worries. A type 1 worry is, gee, I'm worried about what's going on. I'm worried, is the speech safe? Is someone going to steal our stuff? And that's a type 1 worry. A type 2 worry is where we start beating ourselves up for having particular thoughts or emotional experiences. So we say something like, I shouldn't be worried. There's something wrong with me. This is terrible. This is awful. Not everyone is. And when we start doing that, what we start doing is if you think about hustle culture, hustling with yourself. Now imagine that turned in on yourself. You have a worry. And instead of being, gee, it's kind of tough to be a human in a strange place right now on a strange beach where I'm with my family and yeah, it's nice, but I'm also I want to make sure that everything's good. That's type 1. Type 2 is where we start layering on judgment and we start hustling with ourselves as to whether we're allowed or not allowed. And this can impact us because it can, again, stop us from living and laughing and connecting in ways that are really important to our lives.
We do get access to talk to a lot of different people outside the community, and a lot of them will say that they're anxious to execute. And so they either become forever students where they're just consuming a bunch of content, but not actually putting themselves out there. How do you help mitigate that when you talk to people?
Well, one of the biggest fake ideas is, number one, the idea that you just need to manifest.
Right.
You just need to manifest an outcome. Okay. In fact, what the research shows is that when we think about good potential outcomes, it's actually really important thinking about what could go wrong.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
It's actually really, really important. There is fascinating research showing that when you just think positive, that actually what it does is it tricks your brain and your body into thinking you've done all the work. So they've done research with athletes or with people wanting to get healthier or win races, where they ask people just to visualize an outcome. And what they find in multiple studies is those people actually train less, are less likely to be effective in the race because they've actually neurologically tricked their brains into thinking that they've done the work. So does that mean we've got to be negative? No. What we need to do is we need to accompany our vision. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. With also, it's called the contrast, mental contrasting. What could go wrong? What are some obstacles?
See,
what might not work? And that actually predicts greater effectiveness.
So I am a very positive thinker and I never beat myself up. And I get in trouble for this. I say, if people heard the way that I talk to myself, they would think this arrogant sociopath. But I believe that if you're not your biggest cheerleader, you just can't, I can't get there. But at the same time, what I'm neurotic about is what you're talking about. I'm thinking big, but I'm looking for am I missing? What is not going to go right? What am I not thinking about? What is the thing that to your point, like, doing what we do here and running this business, we invest in different companies and business, and I get pitched all the time. And anytime I meet a founder that's pitching me on something, if all they can tell me is all the great things and they can't articulate what potential risks are, it's an immediate like write off and no for me, because it means somebody has not done the work to actually go through the process of thinking like, yes, you have the big idea. A lot of people do that. But what are the things that you're not seeing that could go wrong?
Absolutely.
I think it's in a way, an irresponsible way to live life.
It's completely irresponsible. And again, the research doesn't support effectiveness in just thinking positive. Mm-hmm. We know that when we are in a positively oriented mood, we are likely to think everything's going to be okay. The check's going to sign itself. Payroll's just going to happen. Yep. When we are in this more editorial, neutral to negative mood, where we are starting to think about what are the risks, what could go wrong here, that is a crucial part of, in a wholesome, healthy way, looking at any kind of business endeavor.
But even think about, like, imagine you're a dad of a family or a mom, and you're like, and there is clear threats, and you're like, don't worry, children, I have manifested us.
It's all okay.
We will get through this.
We will be fine.
No, that's a completely irresponsible way to go through. Or like if I'm running a company and I say, guys, payroll is looking a little tight next week, but don't worry, I've manifested.
Everything's going to be fine. There is a word we use in psychology for the idea of purely manifesting. Mm. We call it magical thinking. The idea that I'm just going to, if magical thinking worked, anyone who had cancer right now could just manifest a cure. Okay. The idea is it's irresponsible. It's an irresponsible idea, because what it does is it makes people feel and be responsible for everything that happens, even stuff that they have absolutely no control over. Coming back to your beautiful and important question related, which is when people are wanting to do something, but they keep on holding back. What is important? So it is important, number one, to have this vision. It is important, number two, to think of obstacles. Another really critical aspect is that often when people think about, I just need to be confident enough, I just need to be ready enough, I need to do all of those things. What they are basically saying to themselves is that if they just get their mind in the right place, everything will follow. If I just get my mind in a confident mode, everything else is going to be okay. This is not a good way to be, because when there's market forces or when things go wrong, when there's externalities that happen, your confidence now is completely dependent on the world. The best way to build confidence is to get out of your head and into your life. The best way to build confidence is to get out of your head of like, when is it going to be right? How is it going to be right? And to literally put one step in front of the other and keep moving towards the thing that you believe in. Keep moving towards your values. Don't ignore the risks, but move towards your values.
It sounds like action's the opposite of depression. Like, it's like when you feel like you're progressing towards something and just chipping away towards something, it's so much better than just sitting still.
Progress is one of the most important aspects of being human. When we look at our human needs, what are some of our core human needs? They are belonging, okay, a sense of belonging. They are competence, a sense that we're keeping on moving towards things that matter to ourselves. And they are things like values. And so you said something so beautiful there. You said the opposite of depression lands up being action. Of course, depression, like in a clinical sense, is a very, very complex experience. We know that when people are feeling down, moving ourselves towards our values is crucial. Now, for one person, moving yourself towards your values is going to be a tiny step of courage. It's going to be a tiny step of getting out of bed and making a cup of tea. For another person, it's going to be writing an email. For another person, it's going to be the pitch.
I need intense. For me, I need intense. I like intensity.
Yeah. And so there are different levels of courage.
Right.
When we think of courage, often we think that courage is about the sword and courage is often a whisper.
Yeah.
It's a whisper for some people, and for other people, it's intense.
Yeah.
For other people, it's a roar. But I think the crucial part of this is we all have stories. We all have stories that we tell ourselves of why we're not good enough or why we're an imposter. We have difficult thoughts. We have difficult emotions. These, again, are normal. They are normal. When we push them aside, we are doing away effectively with our evolutionary history. It doesn't work. So difficult thoughts and emotions, is the business going to be successful? Maybe it's these thoughts are normal. The most important aspect of being effective as a human being in the world is keeping on moving towards the thing that you believe in, keeping on moving towards what matters, even when it's difficult. And at the same time, you've got a little backpack that you're carrying with you. And in your backpack is your compassion for yourself, because sometimes you're going to give a pitch and you're going to stuff up. It's going to be your courage. It's going to be your curiosity. And Michael, you spoke about self-talk. Okay? You spoke about self-talk. So
Oh, you don't want to hear my self-talk.
I think self-talk is one of the most underrated ways we can be in the world. And I'll give you 2 examples. Think about a child in a restaurant. Think about your child in a restaurant. The child gets down from the chair and table and it decides it wants to go and explore. Okay, it wants to go explore the restaurant. We've all been there. Child refuses to sit and eat the meal, wants to go and explore. What does the child do? The child gets off the chair, runs away, and then does something so beautiful. The child turns back. It looks. It makes sure that its parents or caregivers are still there.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't go back to the table. It runs even further. Now, what is going on for that child? What is happening is what we call a secure base. The child knows that if something goes wrong while they are exploring, the parents or caregiver will have its back.
Yeah.
Okay? It is that knowledge. It's that knowledge. It's exquisite. It's beautiful. It's that knowledge that enables the child to learn, to grow, to explore, to be curious, to do all the things that we need to do as humans. So take that idea and think about it in terms of self-talk. If you do not have your own back, if you are not kind to yourself, if you are not offering yourself a secure base of love, then it is going to be difficult for you to take risks in the world because there's too much at stake.
I've changed my life by monitoring my thoughts. Like I now, when I'm thinking about something, just say I'm making the bed, I will step outside my thoughts and look at what I'm thinking. Is that weird?
No, and it relates actually to the second thing that I was going to say about this self-talk, about this compassion for the self is having your own back.
Yeah.
And talking to yourself kindly. Just doing something as simple as when you're having a tough moment, putting your hands in front of your chest and like holding yourself.
So like after the floss is stuck in the tooth, we can hug ourselves.
You can
like
ground yourself.
You're just grounding.
Often when we feel stuck, what we do is we say, you know, we're having a bad day, we're stuck in a fight. This is what I call hooked, okay? When you are hooked in, you're stuck in your difficult thoughts and emotions. And often when people feel stuck from a therapeutic perspective or a coaching perspective, imagine you go to the person and they feel stuck. They don't know what to do in their career. They don't know what to do in their lives. And you say to them, well, what do you think you should do? What do you think you should do? And the person says, I've got no idea. Like, that's why I'm having the conversation with you. I am stuck by definition. You then say to the person, imagine we brought someone into the room who loves you, who cares about you, who wants the best for you. What would that person advise? And there is something remarkable that happens. The individual starts saying, well, they would tell me to do ABC. They would tell me to put in this new job application. They would tell me to just go for it. They would tell me I need to be kinder to myself. So what is happening here is the person is moving from their perspective being stuck in, gee, this is how I feel, gee, this is terrible, not knowing how to move forward. And as soon as we start bringing what we call a third person perspective, a third person is, what would your best teacher advise? What would a loving parent advise? The person is able to perspective take. They now are not in their narrow view, they're getting a broader view.
Really smart.
And it's one of the most beautiful ways of getting unstuck. So I often think there's this writer, Jim Collins, who speaks about having a board of advisors.
Good to great.
You're good to great. Yeah. You need to have your board of advisors in whatever business. You need to have a board of advisors. But the two most important people that I think every single one needs as their board of advisors are these two people. Number one, your childhood self. Okay? When you are feeling stuck, when you're feeling sad, what does the child in me need right now? What does the child in me think? What do I need to do for the child? Because it might be that the child needs love or connection or relationship, or what does the child in me need? When you are feeling stuck, the second most important person on your board of advisors is your elderly self. The elderly self that is going to look back on your life and say, did you make me proud?
So it's like the wisdom mixed with the child.
It's the wisdom mixed with the child. And so, Michael, to come back to what you were saying earlier, giving yourself a hug, speaking nicely about yourself. If you can't be friends with yourself, how can you?
And if you can't think that you are the best thing since sliced bread, how is anyone else supposed to think you are?
Sometimes I think people are very nervous about looking cocky or arrogant or self-assured. But to your point, it's like if you're not going to be kind to yourself and be your biggest cheerleader, how can you expect anyone else to be? And I get that, but at the same time, and what I was going to talk to you about nuances. So my grandmother was a full Japanese woman. And my mother's half.
Yeah.
And there was no shortage of looking at our shame in our family and saying, they're like, and I think one thing that worries me is we live in a time where it's like positive self-talk and accept who you are and everything's okay. And, you're fine where you're at. And I think in a way, some people could use a little more shame. And I say that with a nuance being like, I think I'm great and I hold myself and I talk to myself very positively. But at the same time, I also live in a state where I believe everything that's not going right for me in my life is actually my fault or something that I could fix.
Yes.
And so the way I talk to myself is like, you're great, but you could, there is room for improvement here, or you could be better to your wife, or you can be more patient with your kids.
Yes.
All these things.
This is really important nuance. There is a world of difference between faking perfectionism versus being kind to yourself. Okay? We are all imperfect. We can love ourselves in our imperfections. And if we think about self-acceptance is not the same, or should not be the same, as passive resignation. Self-acceptance is not the same as saying, gee, I love myself, therefore I don't need to change.
Yeah.
Self-acceptance is actually the ability to love both the current version of you as well as to recognize the future potential you and to move towards it. In other words, self-acceptance is about loving all the versions of what you could be.
Quick break to talk about Hungryroot. I am so excited to talk to you guys about this new partner, Hungryroot. If you're like most Americans, you value eating healthy, but you don't always have all the options right at your disposal. With Hungryroot, you get all of the best ingredients and all of the healthiest foods delivered straight to your door. What I love about Hungryroot is it saves you time. I personally can't stand going to the grocery store. I also can't stand going to a store where I can't find all of the best ingredients that I want with the healthiest foods possible. We love that. We love the option for people to eat healthier. And Hungryroot is the easiest way to eat healthy. They send you fresh, high quality groceries, simple recipes, and essential supplements. It's like your personal assistant for healthy living. When you sign up, you can take a short, fun quiz, and Hungryroot will get to know your personal health goals, what you like to eat, and more. Then they'll build you a personalized cart with all of your groceries needs for the week and give you delicious recipe recommendations to put those groceries to use. And like I mentioned earlier, each order is fully customizable, so you can take their suggestions or choose anything you want. They've got all sorts of different options. They got fresh produce, high quality meat and seafood, healthy snacks, smoothies, sweets, ready to eat meals, kids snacks and meals, vitamins and supplements, and much more, all with the most healthy ingredients and the healthiest options. So check it out right now. Hungryroot is offering the Skinny Confidential listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/skinny to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/skinny. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you. What an incredible offer, 40% off and free veggies for life. hungryroot.com/skinny. The Skinny Confidential, Him and Her podcast is sponsored by Betterhelp. One of the greatest benefits that Lauren and I have doing this show is we get to regularly talk about our feelings, talk to experts, talk to all sorts of people to just share our thoughts and opinions. So many people don't do enough of this. One common denominator that Lauren and I have found interviewing some of the world's highest performers and greatest minds on this show is that many of them regularly use therapy and talk to professionals in their own personal lives to achieve the goals and outcomes that they want in their own life. This is why we love BetterHelp so much. BetterHelp makes therapy accessible to everybody right from the comfort of your own home, your office, wherever you consume digital content. And they're able to pair you right away to licensed professionals. They have thousands on the platform. You can pick and choose your own therapist and change at any time. And I think this is such an incredible platform because long gone are the days where you have to go to a therapist's office, pick one person, sit in a waiting room. It's an awkward process. You're not in your comfort zone. Here, like I said, you can do it right from the comfort of your own home or wherever you feel most comfortable and just share your thoughts, opinions, and feelings. And just getting stuff off your chest is going to get you in the right mindset. So many times, so many of the problems and issues that we face or anxieties that we face can be solved by just talking out our problems. So Lauren and I are such fans of therapy, particularly with BetterHelp. So if you've been on the fence thinking about going into therapy, but haven't really taken the time to do so yet and are just, waiting and hesitating, don't hesitate any longer. Try BetterHelp. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/skinny today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/skinny for 10% off your first month.
This is music to my ears. I'm such a bread fan. I love bread. I have to have a piece of bread every single day. Even when I was in the midst of losing 60 pounds, I still had my piece of bread with my grass-fed butter every single day. There is a bread. It's called Hero Bread, and it has 0 to 1 gram of net carbs. It also has, let me blow your mind, 0 grams of sugar, and it's high in fiber. I personally am always looking for bread that's high in fiber because it gets things moving. And this, like I said, has barely any carbs, 0 sugar, and it's high in fiber. So it really hits every single point. They also have buns and tortillas. They even have a 2-gram net carb Hero croissant. Like they have all their bases covered. If you're a bread fan like me, you have to check them out. I'm telling you, everything's delicious. It's fluffy. I like it with like a jam from the farmer's market. It's like this peach jam I have. It's so good. Little grass-fed butter. You cannot go wrong. You could even make a BLT. Everything is like guilt-free, which I'm obsessed with. I also love nostalgia. So I love like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a grilled cheese. You could make enchiladas with the tortillas. So good. Hero Bread makes the same delicious favorites free of consequences or compromises. Don't give up on being a breadhead. Hero Bread is offering you 10% off on your order. Go to hero.co and use code SKINNY at checkout. That's skinny at HERO.co.
Because it's very, imagine any individual going through life that is out of integrity somewhere, but telling themselves they're great. That's a sociopath.
Yes.
Right? Like that's
yes.
that's a dangerous combination. And there's a lot of people that, they hear about manifestation or positive self-talk and it like negates the poor behaviors.
Yes.
And they're like, well, I'm just
There's a lack of accountability and this is again why these emotional agility skills are crucial, because we do live in a world that seems to value relentless positivity and just faking it. And I am going to accept myself, therefore nothing that ruffles me is anything that I'm going to engage with, and when we do this, we actually move ourselves away from the versions of ourselves that actually grow through having difficult conversations, grow through recognizing that there are things that we can change. And this is why when I talk about all emotions, I think about emotions as data. So what do I mean by this? An emotion isn't good or bad. Think about guilt, the example you used earlier. Guilt is one of the most important emotions that we can have as a human being. If we did not experience guilt, we would all be sociopaths, okay? Guilt is the thing that says to us, gee, the way that I treated my friend was wrong. Guilt is the thing that says, I want to do that, but actually I think it's not such a great thing.
I know someone who doesn't have guilt, and you're right. That's crazy. I never thought about it that way. There's a lack of guilt, and there's a lack of being able to pause and be like, wow, that really hurt someone's feelings, or wow, I shouldn't have said that because that's not nice, or I shouldn't have told that secret. There's no guilt surrounding it, which makes total sense.
Yes. Guilt is what we call a social emotion. If we did not have guilt, the world is kind of running amok, but if we didn't have guilt, imagine. So guilt is a really important emotion. When I'm experiencing guilt, often it's guilt in relation to my children.
Yeah, I feel that.
And it's when I'm traveling too much. And what is my guilt telling me? My guilt is basically saying, hey, Susan, you value your children. You value this relationship. And you're feeling like you aren't investing enough connection and time and energy. So guilt is a core way that we can, if we are slowed down into ourselves and we aren't just back to the earlier part of the conversation, if we're just pushing through and bottling and bottling and bottling and getting on with life, we can turn around and have pushed all those moments of guilt aside and look at it and go, oh my goodness, I've just lost 20 years of my life. And how did I get here?
I think you can use it as a compass too. It's like, to me, when I have a guilt with my kids, what I'm realizing, the guilt with my kids and not being at home because I'm working tells me that I need to spend more time at home. It's like an indicator.
Yes.
You're right. It is data.
Yes.
Ed Milet talks about being blissfully dissatisfied. And you kind of talked about this earlier. It's like, I can be really happy with my life, and I love my life, but also dissatisfied in the sense where I still have goals to hit. And I feel like being blissfully dissatisfied is very much parallel to what you said about the childlike, which is bliss, but also the wisdom, which tells me I have more potential to uncover.
Yes, such a beautiful, beautiful way of connecting it. And when human beings develop what I call, and this relates a little bit to what Ed said, when human beings develop what I call overcompetence. So overcompetence is when you go out with your partner and you know exactly what their opinion's going to be of the movie, and you know exactly what you're going to talk about over dinner, and you know exactly what the routine is. Overcompetence is a sign that we are atrophying in our experience. Over challenge, where we're always walking on eggshells, where we just, we constantly like never satisfied because it's not the, it's the wrong edge of it. We create huge amounts of stress for ourselves. And so my equivalent of what Ed's talking about is, I call it being whelmed. Not overwhelmed, not underwhelmed, just whelmed.
Yeah, that's good.
And whelmed is where I'm moving in the direction of my values. I'm moving in ways of growth in my life, but I'm also connected with the idea that when I have difficult emotions, and those emotions are persistent, that those emotions are often signposting needs or values that I'm turning my back against. So the guilt being an example, but there are many others.
Makes total sense. I would be crazy not to ask you about kids. We have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and the emotions are like a roller coaster. It's like a bag of Chex Mix. You never know what you're going to get. What are some tips for parents to help their children?
And it's crazy to see how quick they can go in and out of
like
emotion.
It'll be tantruming, and then the next second it's like
laughter,
smiling and laughing, and like it's like literally a Gemini. But it's like crazy. So what advice do you have for us to get on or off the emotional roller coaster of children? Well,
remember how we did that example of the child in the restaurant? where the child is exploring the restaurant and knowing that it can explore in safety is actually what allows it to be curious and allows it to learn and grow. Think of that idea applied literally internally in children. Okay, so every day, in every way, children are trying to make sense of the world. And this brings up a lot of emotions for them. Okay, that is literally their job, is to try and make sense of the world. Now, when they experience sadness or anger or frustration, and they are able to experience those emotions in safety, okay, so they don't have a parent punishing them every time they're sad or trying to grab the sadness and paper over it with cupcakes, or, the child is actually almost given.
I do that.
Well, we all do
that.
sometimes.
I do
with
that. I'm like,
such good intentions.
Today my son was crying and I was like, oh my God, do you want a cookie? Fuck, I do that.
And you know what you did? I came home and he would not stop asking for more cookies. I was the bad guy. I was like, there's no cookies.
With such good intentions. We do it with good intentions. But basically, what we want to be doing as parents is not signaling to our children that some emotions are good and some emotions are bad. We want to be helping the child, depending on the age, but we know that this applies as young as 2 years old. We want to be firstly showing up to our children's difficult emotions. It seems like you feel sad.
Even when they're whining, we can't be like, we don't whine in this family.
It sounds like you're having a tough day. It sounds like you're struggling with this issue. It's like we want to show up to our children's emotions. We don't want to, and I'll explain why now. Okay. And let yourself off the hook.
I'm sweating. I'm like, there's no screaming in the house. I said, we don't scream in this family.
I will give you an example of me stuffing this up.
I go back to the drawing board. I have some guilt.
No. We've all stuffed this. I'll give you an example later of me stuffing this up.
Oh my God.
But we want to signal to our children that all emotions are acceptable.
Okay.
That doesn't mean all actions are acceptable. I can show up to my son's frustration with his baby sister. I can love him. I can see his frustration. I can help him name his frustration. It doesn't mean I'm endorsing his idea that he gets to give her away to the first stranger that he sees in a shopping mall, okay? We own our emotions. They don't own us. So what we want to do is we want to show up to our children's emotions with compassion, with kindness, and with empathy.
Give me an example. Let's say my daughter takes my son's book out of his arms and rips it out of his hands and then starts whining. She starts whining.
Well, let's look at it this way. 2-year-old, 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Not quite learning to haven't figured out sharing yet, right?
Yeah.
Jealousy when one gets one book and one doesn't. How do you manage that to, you want to validate someone's feelings, but you also say you can't rip things out of people's hands?
Exactly what you just said.
Okay.
Exactly what you just said. It's like, it seems like you're feeling such and such. And we know, so this is not the be all and it's not the only thing. We want to show up to our children's difficult emotions. Over time, we want to help them to label those difficult emotions.
So I know you're having a hard time right now, but you can't rip the book out of his hand. Or I know you're frustrated, but you can't sock him in the face and punch him in the balls.
And let's go find something that, so what we're starting to do is we're starting to show up to their difficult emotions. We are starting to help them to label their difficult emotions. Having a hard time, tough experience, feel sad, angry, frustrated. Children as young as 2 years old who are more able to have a wide emotional vocabulary. They're not just I'm mad or I'm sad. They're starting to connect with other emotional experiences. Those children in longitudinal studies have higher levels of mental health and well-being. They have high levels of ability to delay gratification. They are more successful in achieving their goals. And I'm talking literally 20, 30, 40 years down the track. And I'll give you an example that plays out that you'll see. Imagine you've got a child who's now 16. And someone says to the child, why don't we go do drugs together? And your child has been on the periphery of the social circle and has wanted to be part of this group. So now a child who just says, oh, I'm not part of the group, that feels good, is more likely to go and act irresponsibly. If the child, on the other hand, is more able to say, this feels exciting, but it also feels wrong. It's also not who I want to be. It's also not what I want. You can see that that child in the second example is going to be more able to move away from difficult experiences. So I want to just play this out quickly, which is
the reasoning takes place.
There's a reasoning, there's an emotion granularity, there's a reasoning, there's an understanding of my cause and the consequences. So I'll give you an example of where I think I did this well and an example of where I stuffed it up. I remember years ago, my child coming home from school and being extremely upset with something that had happened to another child at school. We had the most amazing conversation. Instead of me just saying to her, well, it didn't happen to you, don't worry about it. We had the most amazing conversation about how she was feeling, about her upset at what happened to this other child. And we started saying things like, it seems like what you saw was that you felt the situation was unfair. And it seems like you really care about fairness. You care about fairness because our emotions signpost our needs and our values. Okay? When we say something like, I'm bored, and we get stuck in that difficult emotion, what is the value that's being signposted by that difficult emotion? It's often that I value more learning and growth in my life, and I don't have enough of it. When you say something like, I'm lonely, we can get stuck in that. But what is the need or value that's being signposted? It's often that we value more intimacy and connection in our lives and our relationships, and we need to be moving towards that. So for my daughter, instead of just pushing aside the difficult emotion, I was like, what is this emotion signposting about her needs and her values? It's signposting that she cares about fairness. So we had a conversation about fairness. What does being a fair friend look like to you? How do you want to be fair in your relationships? How do you want to be fair in
Probably
your
made her feel
conversations?
better.
Number one, it made her feel better.
Yeah.
But number two, 4 years later, because often as parents, we're doing things literally for the long game. 4 years later, something happened at school and she came home to me and she said to me, Mommy, this and this happened and I intervened because I really care about fairness. And that is remarkable. Like it was, and we all have the ability to do this. So it's about showing up. It's about helping children to label difficult emotions, but also to understand what is it that they care about underneath the difficult emotion. I want to give you an example of where I did it badly, if that's okay.
Please.
Sure.
Just to be compassionate with ourselves because we're all doing the best we can. When you said you were in a breaking out in a sweat earlier.
There's no handbook for yes or right, wrong.
It's rough.
Yeah,
it is so rough.
It's rough.
So think about a baby, a little baby, and we love them and we coddle them and we do everything that they need. And then at 6 weeks, we take them and we hand them over to a complete stranger to get their shots. So I took my child to the doctor and he was laughing and smiling and goo goo gaga, happy, calm. And I handed him over to the doctor. And the doctor gave him his shots. And my son's face went from calm into outrage. He was outraged and he started screaming and crying. And I did what all of us would, or many of us do in this situation. I picked him up and I said, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And I will never forget the nurse so kindly, so beautifully, so gently saying to me, Susie, it's not okay. Your son is in pain.
Yeah.
And it's not okay. Because what was I doing? I was invalidating. And I came home and I beat myself up because I've got a flipping Ph.D. in this stuff. And the first thing that we know is don't invalidate your child's emotions. And the first thing I did was invalidated his emotions. And I'm married to a very, very, very funny, dry sense of humor doctor. And he came home from work and I'd been beating myself up all day. And he said to me, how's your day been? And I was hormonal and there was all this stuff going on. And I said to him, you'll never believe what I did. Noah was crying. He was upset. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And my husband just looked at me. And then he smiled and he said to me, it's okay, Susan. It's okay. And it was so cute because...
That is cute.
Because what he was basically saying is, we all do the best we can.
Yeah, we're all doing the best
We're all doing the best we can.
So what would you have done differently looking back on that situation? What would you have said?
I think the idea of just saying to a child, it's okay, is kind of like saying, not the same example, but it's kind of like saying to someone who's in grief, oh, don't worry, it all happened for a reason.
Right.
Or someone who's got cancer. It's forced, false, toxic positivity, which is a huge part of what my work talks against, this idea that all emotions are normal. A much more healthy way when I'm talking about showing up to children, helping them to label their emotions, helping them to understand their needs and values. Why? Why am I saying this? Because what we are teaching our children is this. Number one, when we help our children to have permission to feel what they feel, we are signaling to them that no emotions are scary, that emotions come and go, that emotions are not scary. When we do this, we help our children to literally develop the emotion regulation skills that are going to help them to deal with breakups in their life or not getting into the college that they want. Because what we're starting to do is we're starting to say, number one, emotions aren't scary. Okay? Number two, you felt sad. And instead of me trying to brush over your sadness, we spoke about it, we chatted about it, and now the sadness has passed. The child is learning that emotions pass, that emotions are transient. Number three, the child is learning that emotions signpost our values. And that when we connect with our emotions and try to understand the values, we are now going full circle back to the beginning of the conversation, not living our lives in autopilot. We are able to connect with who we want to be in the world and grow effectively.
They're a compass.
They are a compass.
And in a way, it's leaning into the emotions as opposed to leaning out.
It's leaning into them, and it's saying, emotions, our emotions are data. Now, our emotions aren't directives. Just because I feel something doesn't mean I need to express it. Just because I feel something doesn't mean I need to have it out with a person. Our emotions are data, not directives, but they are a compass. And when we are walking through a world that is changing, where AI is coming, where there are wars and broken hearts, where there's all of this stuff going on in the world, the single biggest gift we can give ourselves and our children is to be healthy with our humanity and to be able to choose who do we want to be.
So Lauren, here's how it would have worked. You could have come in and said, I understand this floss in your tooth is stressing you out, but eventually you'll get it out and you'll feel better. You would have done that.
I would have done that if the lights were off and my Salt Rock nightlight was on. Dr. Susan David, thank you for coming on the show. Emotional Agility. Where can everyone buy your book? Message you on Instagram. Tell us everywhere to contact you.
Home address, social security.
Everything. I'm going to give 3 things. Number one, I've got a free emotional agility quiz online that's been taken by 200,000 people.
Wow.
And it gives you a full 10-page report. You can find that at susandavid.com/learn.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's quick, but it's really helpful, and it connects with values and all of these things that we've spoken about. Second is my TED Talk, The Gift and Power of Emotional Courage.
10 million views.
Well, I loved it, and I loved doing it. I loved the experience of doing it. It was a beautiful experience. And so the TED Talk, The Gift and Power of Emotional Courage. And then my book is Emotional Agility.
You're amazing.
Dr. Susan, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad we got to make it happen. I know you were just in here for a brief stint, right?
Yeah. I was speaking at a conference. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Should've
Come back on anytime.
You came specifically for us, and then you went to do
I came specifically for you, and then by the by, I went to a conference.
Thank you. I'll let you know how the floss goes. I'll let you know. Next time it gets stuck, I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.